for me to be able to come and present and just share a little bit of information that I think is really critical at this time of year as we start this process. And going back to school this year looks very different, and it's anything but routine. So I think the topic was timely. I think the issues that we're going to address, and I hope people have a lot of Q&A, questions and answers. I'm open to conversations, and I really do hope that it stimulates all of us to think about the advantages of building solid routines in our life. So is it okay if I share my screen?
Yes, and I want to encourage everybody on Facebook, if you're watching and you have an audience that needs to hear this message about your kids going back to school and why a routine is more important than studying, share as a watch party. You guys can do that right now. Or feel free, if you're watching this later, share it again. I know there's a lot of people out there that are going to be really interested in this subject. And feel free to ask questions in the chat. I'll be watching as she presents.
Okay.
Right.
So, let's see if we can get this out. I thought it was up, but maybe it wasn't, but we'll make it happen. Boom. There we go.
Great.
So, are we lucky enough to have screen sharing happening? We're hoping.
Let's see. I have a black screen.
And now a blue one?
Now a blue one. Yay.
Yes. All right. So
awesome.
There's my contact information. If anybody wants to get in touch, we have a contact on the website, and you're certainly welcome to call and leave a message on the cell phone. I'll also have the contact information on the last slide as well. So lots of different ways to get a hold of myself, or my absolute right-hand person is Tiffany Wilkinson, and she also works in our company. So I'm the executive director, and she's the senior research associate involved with these types of projects. So we're certainly glad to be here, and as professionals, I need to just kind of do a disclosure so that you know that we do receive funding from other agencies. And just to make that clear, I don't ever want people to be presumptive about where we get our money from or what we do. It's totally an open book, and I feel it's appropriate. So, the first thing I just wanted to say was thank you. Thank you to all of you for taking time out of this week to want to learn more about what's good for kids. And what I know is an old adage that I was told by strong women in my family, my grandmother and my mother, which is I wasn't about raising children, I was about raising adults. So I'm hoping that this helps you in some way develop more capable, competent, confident, mature adults, and that your kids are better off as a result of information that you learn here. So, my question is always, what's the outcome? And for this talk, the outcome is, what does sleep have to do with academic success, and why is it as or more important than studying? And on an interactive environment, if you were coming to one of our seminars, I would stop everything right here, open up the chat room, open up the microphones, and let everybody talk about sleep is critical. Being that that's not this medium or modality, I do just want to kind of have you muse for a second or two about why and what do you think research has told us about academic success and its relationship to sleep, because ironically, 25 years ago, this wouldn't have even been a topic of presentation. So when you think about academic success and you think about sleep, they kind of happen at different times, and you're thinking, so what's the relationship here? Well, we've learned a lot in the last 20 years, and we've learned that certain stages of sleep are really important for laying information down in your brain. And I will be glad to share this PowerPoint on a website. Lori can certainly have access to it, and she's welcome to share it with others as well. What we know is that when you sleep, sleep is not only restorative to your health, but it also allows us to put all the information we've learned during the day into the mental filing cabinet. And we do this through sleep. And our opportunity is not only to store information, but then to be able to retrieve it at a later time. And REM sleep is very important for the ability to memorize. We also know that sleep and the restorative properties of sleep create quality of living for the next day. And if we want students to be successful at school, whether school is at home, maybe it's home with you right now, or school is at another facility, or we're talking students that may or may not have gone back to college. The reality is that what we know is that sleep-deprived young people don't do as well academically, on tests, involved in academic activities in the classroom, or making important decisions, whether those are decisions about projects at school, whether those are decisions about what kinds of friends to have in their sphere of influence. We know that sleep matters for higher order thinking skills. And lastly, we know that there's this clock you have inside you. And having good sleep that's not disrupted definitely plays into that clock, and that clock is also another way that we manage behavior. So I get to share with you a study that was actually just published yesterday. So you talk about current events, this couldn't have been more timely. Ariel Williamson just got done literally publishing an article in Child Psych and Psychiatry, and they looked at 5,000 middle school kids, and they assessed them on well-being. So what does it mean to be a healthy, okay kiddo, right? They looked at psychosocial measures. How do kids act psychologically and socially with others? They looked at their ability to self-control their behaviors, their emotions. They had measures of behavioral health, and they also looked academically at how did students do. They used a number of different methods to gather data, so we like that in the world of science. We get a lot of different ways to gather information about the same ideas. So they asked caregivers and teachers, and they even had students complete those assessments, and here's what they found. Whether children had ongoing sleep problems from the time they were little, when they were born, all the way through childhood, or they didn't develop these problems until school started. The researchers at CHOP, we know it as CHOP, it's the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, they found that sleep disturbances at any age were associated with diminished well-being by the time kids were in late elementary school, 4th and 5th grade. Now, that may kind of seem like, well, I kind of had an idea about that, but what they found beyond that was alarming. 7% of kids had persistent problems that started young and lasted through middle school. There were a number who had preschool sleep problems. There was almost 1 in 5 who had problems sleeping in middle school years. Mild sleep problems that lasted over time accounted for another 1 in 8 kiddos. And just about half the kids in this study really didn't have any sleep problems at all. So that means that almost 50% of these kiddos that they looked at had some concerns from mild to persistent. And they said, so what happens? What happens is that those with persistent problems had the greatest impairment in well-being. But what was surprising to everybody was that those kids with even mild problems over time ended up with psychosocial impairments by ages 10 and 11. And as parents, I think that would alarm all of us. Those impairments were not only psychosocial, but they were also academic. And what that tells me as an educational psychologist, I think what it tells medical professionals like Lori, and what it certainly tells the larger group of medical professionals is we need to be asking specific questions about sleep of all children coming in for well child checks. We need to be doing it consistently to screen, because what we're now clear about is that disrupted sleep and persistent problems over time may be dramatically, causally related to what we're seeing in terms of behavior in academics and how kids behave psychosocially. So that's just one study that got published yesterday. Add that to the slew of data that's been out in the last 15 years, and we got a lot of research that talks about the other findings about what happens when young people don't get enough sleep. Something as simple as sleep. And the first thing we know is there's a direct relationship between sleep schedules and academic performance. Poor sleep negatively affected how kids produced products at school, right? And that happened to 1 in 4, 25%. They missed deadlines. They had lower grades as a result of it. And some of them even felt the need to drop classes in college or accept failing grades in junior high and high school. So if we don't think that sleep affects academics, we're sorely mistaken. Studying affects academics, but so does sleep. We also know, as I said earlier in the first bullet about REM sleep, about rapid eye movement sleep, that if you don't get good sleep, you're going to have problems with memory. And there's still a lot of education that's involved with memorization and understanding foundational information that you're going to need to rely upon later on as academic tasks get more difficult as you age and move up in school. Unfortunately, those kiddos with poor sleep don't necessarily digest information real rapidly, and then they don't have any place to store it. They don't have hooks to hang it on. And that affects neuroplasticity in the brain, especially a very, very small part of the brain called the hippocampus. But that's where you put memories into this really tiny storage device. And if you don't get good sleep, you have the potential to then create opportunities for not success, but limitations and failures, not because of intelligence, but because of an inability to get good sleep, to create that restorative experience, and to allow for memories to actually form and then be able to be retrieved when it's called upon. We also know that poor sleep inhibits social skills. Think about the end of a long work week if you're a parent, or you're a worker, or you're an adolescent and you're going to school full-time and working full-time, or you're a college student. You get to the end of a long week, many of us don't want to be very social, and those who do usually need a little liquid lubrication to get out there and actually have some skills at. We're tired. We're experiencing cognitive and physical fatigue, and it directly impacts social skills. Add to that, if I've got poor memory because I don't have good sleep, all of a sudden I don't know how to read people's faces as well. I don't recognize social cues. I don't necessarily see things as humorous. I maybe take things the wrong way. And unfortunately, a lot of that leads to bad behavior that's misinterpreted as bad behavior and not necessarily interpreted for the cause of it, which is actually non-restorative sleep. Now, add all that together and see how many young students in that classroom want to work with the sleep-deprived student whose behavior is inappropriate, who doesn't get their work done, who doesn't carry their weight and their load in the school project. All of a sudden you see a lot of social stigma and isolation that comes as a result of it. Now, how much sleep do kids need? That's always been a question, and we actually refined these numbers back in 2015. The National Sleep Foundation, as a result of dealing with many, many, many organizations, American Academy of Pediatrics, family practitioners, nurse practitioners, a lot of different individuals sat down and said, collectively, what do we think about sleep and how much sleep should people be getting? And they actually revised some of these downward, some of them upward, but almost every age category, along with new age categories that didn't exist before, now have very clear recommendations about what we expect from everybody from newborns all the way to older adults. And I cringe at the word older adults because I don't think 65 is really that old. But then again, I'm not writing the book. All I'm doing is reporting, but I don't think 65 is old, just for the record. So when we look at school-age children, I include preschoolers in there because they are being academically challenged. They are being challenged in terms of building social skills, and they are finding themselves in collective environments. So I include preschoolers in here, not just your K-12 and beyond kiddos. And if you look at preschoolers, they're still needing 10 to 13 hours of sleep at night. And I don't know about your family, but when I look at families out in the community and I still see kids out in stores at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night with their families, I'm wondering what's going on in the morning. And these are little kids still in shopping carts, right? These are still kiddos sitting in the front seat, 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old. And then you have kiddos that are acting out, behaviorally inappropriate, screaming in the cash register line. And you look at your watch and you go, gosh, I wonder how much of that behavior is related to a lack of sleep. And yet parents, also in that same lacking sleep situation, find themselves responding inappropriately to those outrageous behaviors of their children. And so you see this negative spiral. So it isn't just about kids and sleep, it's about families and sleep. It's about everybody in sleep. And I don't get paid to talk about sleep. I'm just telling you what I know as an educational psychologist. Sleep is a cornerstone of academic performance. Now, one of the reasons we're having this conversation today is because the main message that I want to share with you is that in order to get a ZZZ, you need a routine. In order to get good sleep, the foundation of that good sleep is based on a life of routine. And I know for some of us that sounds really boring. And I'm sorry. But what brains need is routine. And if you look at routines, not only do brains need routines, but bodies need routines. And we know that there are a lot of benefits of having solid, predictable routines. The first is that you reduce cognitive fatigue because your brain doesn't have to constantly calculate what's coming next. It's called uncertainty or unpredictability. And brains don't like it. Brains like to be efficient. And efficiency comes from knowing routines so that they become automatic and habitual, and the brain doesn't have to waste energy thinking about what's coming next, or planning, or searching the environment to try to figure out what's coming down the pipe, what's coming down the road, what can I expect next, which also creates an awful lot of anxiety. So brains don't like uncertainty. They want predictability. When they have predictability, there's an opportunity for clearer thinking because your brain isn't constantly trying to figure out the environment, which leads you open to opportunities for things like idea generation and problem solving, right? We also have to be aware that everybody has a battery. You get a daily battery and it gets charged up at night with that restorative energy. Some people have more battery power than others. If you happen to be a child with special needs, an individual with disabilities, you don't necessarily start the day with a full battery. And for you, it's about energy management. For you as a parent, it's about teaching your daughter or your son energy management because they've got to make it through the day on less of a charge because their sleep may not be restorative enough due to concerns about their disability. And we have to teach people how to manage energy. The problem is when you don't get restorative sleep, even a good battery doesn't fully charge. Fourth, if we have routines, it allows us to not constantly be scanning the environment for information, trying to have it make sense, which allows us more opportunity to maintain and focus our attention. And that's how we build stronger, faster memory. If we can't do that and we're constantly searching the environment, we're constantly asking people around us, what page are we supposed to be on? What am I doing? What's the homework assignment? I can't find my materials. How come this desk is so organized? Why don't I have a place to study at home? My teacher says I need homework space. I need to get to bed. I'm really tired, right? When all those things are going on and there's a lack of predictability, which I'll admit under COVID-19 right now, there's a lot of unpredictability and it's stressing a lot of us out. But what we don't need to do is add to that chaos by not having routines for our families. And lastly, especially for adults, it helps quiet what we call the tyranny of the urgent, meaning somebody else's crisis, all of a sudden we take it on. And we take it on because our boundaries are reduced. We take it on and we start worrying about insignificant stuff and we ruminate on things that aren't important and we waste a lot of that precious mental energy. And then we don't focus on what's important. So what we try to do is have routines so that when all those urgencies come in, we filter them out and we put them off to the side because we know the routine's important and then we'll get to it. And a lot of times when we get to it, it isn't as important as we thought it was going to be. So your brain needs routines to operate efficiently. And that allows your body the time it needs for restoration, and it reduces stress and stress hormones. So bodies benefit from routines and brains benefit from routines. We know that sticking to a regular schedule sounds important, especially when it comes to sleep. Seems obvious. Gosh, have a regular bedtime. Let's go to bed all at a regular time. But what we find is that life is busy and life is chaotic, and we try to cram a lot into a day. And that nighttime routine may fall apart. It may be left to the wayside because dinner ran late, activities ran late. We ended up having a serious family discussion. Someone so didn't get their homework done. Internet's not working. We can't get this material up online. There's lots of things going on. But what I want to stress to you is that golden statement in the middle. Youth need to make sleep a priority. Not just young children, but adolescents and young adults. So when I say youth, I'm encompassing everybody 0 to 25 while your brain is developing. Those are the developing years. If you have a disability, some of that development may be delayed. We call that being neuro-delayed. But the reality is, regardless of your age, we need sleep. And for young people 0 to 25, sleep needs to be a priority. Go back to those time limits. A solid 8 to 10 hours a night, especially when you're talking about college students, high school students. They're juggling academics, extracurricular activities. Some of them are working. There's family time, social life. There's a lot going on for all young people. And sleep is a really critical part of that. If we let that go to the wayside, we shouldn't be surprised that we get behavior. We shouldn't be surprised that we see negative performance. We shouldn't be surprised that we see attention problems, lack of focus, and difficulty completing tasks. The thing that I think is somewhat challenging for families is we really recommend, as an educational psychologist, I say there is no difference between Saturday and Sunday and Monday through Friday. The schedule stays the same because the rhythms of the body need that consistency. And your body doesn't care that it's a Friday or a Saturday. Your body isn't looking at the calendar. Your body's concerned with the predictability of nature. And if we can get families to understand that you don't throw everything in on the weekend and then blow out the sleep schedule, you actually have much better behavior from children. And more importantly, everybody's prepared for Monday because we're still on the same sleep pattern for school. Now, there's things that are recommended. These recommendations come from the National Sleep Foundation. They come from the CDC. They come from the National Institutes of Health. Everybody's pretty much on the same page about sleep hygiene. First, you got to create an environment that's going to be friendly to sleep. Beds are for sleeping. Homework should be done elsewhere, at a desk, at a space, at a table. Maybe it's at the library. Maybe it's after school in an after-school program. But homework doesn't need to be done laying in bed. Homework needs to be done at a specified homework place. That's another thing about routines, is kids want a place to do a thing, right? It's really important for consistency. And another piece of this is, if a bed is next to a window, blackout curtains are a good idea because the darker it is, the better we sleep, because it allows melatonin, which is a hormone in the body, to be released, and it gets released when we have total darkness. There are some people that supplement sleep with melatonin based on the recommendations of a physician. My first strategy is always change the environment before we add any medication or over-the-counter anything to anybody. Let's make sure we have the most supportive environment. The environment's easy to change. So let's change the environment. And in this case, try to get the room as dark as possible. That means technology's off. That means TVs are off. Small nightlight in the corner is okay, but we really want that room as dark as possible. We talk about people having routines for exercise. Bodies need routines. Bodies need exercise. Bodies also need adequate light exposure. So for as much as you need dark for sleep, you also want to be exposed to light during the day. Getting outside, getting fresh air, getting some natural light is really important. And we don't want to be napping. If we're napping maybe because of overwhelming cognitive fatigue from a disability, that's a different situation. But for the most part, once you're out of the preschool years, naps should be very limited. And if we're going to do them at all, they need to be less than 30 minutes. We don't want you to get into a deep sleep pattern because then you're going to disrupt your sleep at night. The other piece is, if you're going to do aerobic activity, don't do it before dinner. Don't do it before going to bed. Do relaxing exercises. Do stretching. Do yoga. Do breath work, right? That's the stuff you want to do before bedtime to slow down. And kids can do it. Kids love yoga. Kids love learning how to manage their breath. There's nothing wrong with spiritual practices before bedtime. Prayer, meditation. Those are all relaxing exercises, and putting them in a pattern, getting them to be part of this nighttime routine, getting ready to go to sleep, is really helpful in getting better sleep. Limiting caffeine. You know, there's no new news here. You've been hearing this for years. There's lots of stuff out there with caffeine, and boy, oh boy, there are now energy drinks with insane amounts of caffeine. And our kids are drinking them. Look at all the chemicals in energy drinks before you think it's a worthwhile adventure to put in a child's body that's growing and developing. A sip of your energy drink's not a good idea. It's loaded with caffeine. We got lots of kids drinking sodas. Some start drinking coffee pretty early, modeled by parental behavior. There's some teas that are pretty highly caffeinated. We don't want young people consuming a lot of caffeine. It can create a vicious insomnia cycle of not being able to get to sleep when one tries to go to sleep. You should really limit caffeine to 5 or 6 hours before bedtime. If you're going to bed at 8, we really don't want you having any caffeine when you come home from school, to give your body time to unwind and get ready for the nighttime adventure of sleep. Okay? Find time to wind down. A lot of people are super revved up at night. Got lots of homework. Oh my gosh, I got stuff for tomorrow. Oh, I forgot this. I forgot that. I didn't do this. I didn't that. What if I don't get my homework done? Mom, do I have to get up early? Dad, I didn't remember doing that. I left all that at school. Well, today we don't have the left all that at school because we're all home. But the stress of that can be just as overwhelming. So it's really important to have a routine. Maybe it's a nighttime bath. Maybe it's a nighttime shower. Maybe it's just sitting, doing some meditation and having a nice warm glass of a non-caffeinated herbal tea before bed. Whatever the routine, just get it to become a ritual. And it's okay for the whole family to do it. It isn't just single out this child with that behavior or that set of poor academic outcomes. This becomes a family activity, and we all reduce the stress in the household. And this is probably the hardest one of all times. If you want to be the electronics police, all I can tell you is get a basket and everybody puts it in the basket before they go to bed. So you don't police the rooms, you just police the basket. There will be those children who will try to read underneath their covers. They aren't any different than we were 40, 50 years ago with a flashlight in the book. But for the most part, we really have to try to reduce electronic activity before bedtime. We know that blue lights on screens reduce melatonin. We need to be shutting off devices a minimum of 60 minutes before bedtime. There's no laying in bed and playing video games. Solitaire, not a good idea while you're sitting there playing and moving cards around trying to go to sleep. Right? Electronics includes televisions. Televisions are a huge invader of bedrooms. Cable TV stays on all night long. Oh, my child can't sleep without that white noise in the background. Then try some wave machines and turn off the screen. We don't need video imagery behind our eyeballs. It's not good for brain development, and it's not good for sleep. You know, I tell college students, you want to fall asleep, take your most boring class, your most boring textbook, and take that to bed. I'll guarantee you'll be asleep in no time. And you'll wake up feeling pretty good, and you may be even shocked what you might remember. So, this is kind of the content, the focus part that I want to cover. I've also left a couple slides in here that are related to the resources and references, but I wanted to kind of give you a concise, why are routines important and what can you do about them in order to make sleep be a priority in the land of sleep and study. So I want to turn it back to Lori and open for Q&A, and I want to just thank you for the opportunity to come here and chat with you, because I think this stuff's really important. And I see the performance changes when people really take it seriously. So thanks for having me, and I'll turn it back to Lori.
That was excellent information. Wow. You were such a powerful presenter. You're going to have to give me lessons. Thank you. Wow. You're just natural. And I like that you're in the middle of the river.
Oh, that's my backyard.
It's beautiful.
Oh, I love it.
Absolutely gorgeous. So if you guys are on Facebook, put some questions in the Q&A so that I can ask Dr. Sue. You know, I'm starting to think that no one's going to be able to ask questions because they're all frantically trying to figure out. I know, like, I live in Mesa, and I think Mesa schools, a lot of schools start tomorrow. Is that right?
Tomorrow, we started up here. I know Flagstaff started yesterday.
Yeah.
Some are already in session.
So can we talk a little bit about what it's like right now for, you know, the working mom and dad, and kids are at home and they can't go to school? Like, how, I mean, do you have some suggestions for routine for people who are having to work from home, make sure their kids are in their online stuff, and then, you know, what kind of tips do you have as far as making sure that the routine is communicated effectively throughout all members of the family and sticking to it? So I think that's sort of, everyone tries, they fail. So what are some, set us up for success, Dr. Sue?
Okay, so I'll call this post-COVID-19.
Okay.
That's kind of where we're at.
Yeah.
And I think you have to look at a number of different factors before making some long, pervasive, prescriptive behaviors about what everybody should do to be able to return to school successfully. And I don't mean to say this in a trite way, but I'm going to say take a chill pill. I think everybody has set their expectations so high about what all this is going to look like and how it's all going to roll out. And, oh, there's going to be all this bandwidth and we're all going to be online at the same time. We have absolutely stressed our technology to the limits of function. And I was on a call last week and we lost all audio communication. Anybody who was up north by me, you could see the video, nobody had audio. And it wasn't anything we were or were not doing. Technology is literally at its limit. So I think the first thing I say to families is look around and set some realistic expectations for what you think you can do. And family structure has a lot to do with how do we manage all this. The picture for a two-parent adult household or a household where there are extended family members and additional hands looks very different from a household with a single mom and multiple children. So the first thing I say is people need to be kind to themselves and look realistically at what they can and can't accomplish. I think all of us have to lower our standards greatly on what we expect. Many of the people who I know are out there were never trained to be educators. They were never trained to take what they know or what they remember learning in school and turning that into something more than homework support. And in many cases where children are frustrated with technology, can't get the support that they need online, they're turning to parents to be those educators. And some parents are supposed to figure out how to be a preschool teacher, a kindergarten teacher, a fourth grade teacher, and a high school teacher all in the same day at the same time. There is no one that can do that except maybe, I don't know, Laura Ingalls on the One Room Schoolhouse, who was, remember, trained to be an educator. Yeah. So I believe that part of it is about getting real about expectations and setting up routines and places where your children can be every day to feel like they're at school. I had a picture of a mom. She posted it on Facebook and she said, I spent the weekend getting my son ready for school. And she had taken a regular flip open plastic table. She'd made a study carrel out of cardboard box. I mean, it's nothing fancy. And she had a laptop on the left and a laptop on the right. She had paper and pencil available at that workspace. There wasn't a personal desk for a child. They were both sitting in the middle of the living room in her Hogan, but she had a designated space with a designated time, and a designated time to be sitting there. She also would set up timers, because we can't expect kids on technology to stay tuned in for a 40-minute class. We as adults can barely do it. Half an hour in, I'm looking around in a webinar. I don't know who isn't. This is not the medium of humanity. This just happens to be technology that kind of lets us be two-dimensional. So let's set a timer for how much, and then we're going to have a check-in, and we're going to have a break, and we build in breaks. And parents stop working and kids stop schooling, and we take little recess breaks, and we try to break it into manageable amount. I also think open communication between teachers and parents is really going to be critical. I shared the story of a mom who was bringing a son home from Phoenix Children's Hospital. He had a psychiatric break the previous weekend and was doing self-harming behaviors, and they took him to Phoenix Children's. She was bringing her son home on Sunday night and got an email from faculty at the school, and she has 3 children in high school, and they were saying, please try to do everything you can to keep your students' class schedule in that order. Well, she is a freshman, a sophomore, and a junior, and she was on the phone in tears to me for a technical assistance call because the child coming back from the hospital had had a concussion and a traumatic brain injury. And she said, Sue, I'm just trying to get the knives and self-harming things out of my house so my son doesn't try to do this again. I have no idea how I'm supposed to do freshman algebra, sophomore English, and senior economics all at 8 in the morning. And I said, you know, right now the priority is the health and safety of your son. I said, you can catch up with school. So I think being clear about expectations about what's really important is going to be critical for families, and not be beating ourselves up that we don't have the perfect junior high, high school, middle school, elementary school, preschool going on in our living rooms, right? So expectations are critical. And to the extent that we can try to establish routines, we try to establish routines. Open communication with teachers, what's working, what's not working. Get the speed dial to the IT department at school. If you've got technology problems, kids are going to get really bogged down emotionally when they feel like that it's their fault they can't connect. And what we don't want students is disconnected. And the last thing I would say is, if your family's feeling a lot of stress, there are crisis phone lines out there. There are crisis text numbers out there with 24-hour crisis call counselors available. People need to not see crisis and mental health issues as a negative. We need to take action and be proactive so that the children sitting in those unstable households have a place to call, somebody to talk to, and a place to feel safe. And for me, that's the biggest concern about kids not going back to school. I can't ensure the safety of children. I can't ensure the safety of children in families of violence and neglect and sexual abuse. And I certainly can't ensure that the services of my special needs kids are being met when we're trying to do physical therapy through a computer. Those students need interaction with specialists. Those people may be some of the only people that those children are actually getting services from, because they're not getting services anywhere else. So I think a lot of it depends upon family structure. You know, is grandma's living with you? Can you get grandma to help do some monitoring of behavior? I mean, I think there's options, and a lot of it's based on family structure and resources. So I don't know if those are any wizard answers, but, you know, I think it's all about be kind to ourselves and build in some resilience and slough off stuff that's not that important. And don't feel bad if it's not perfect.
You know, you talked about expectations, and one of my favorite sayings is expectations minus reality equals disappointment. So we really need to be like, do a reality check. Just realize that what we're dealing with is really difficult, and everybody who has school-age children is in the same boat. So, you know, communicate with your community, with your friends, with your, you know, colleagues.
And the educators.
Yes, and your educators. And I love routine. And there was another one that I was thinking of. I love that you said to have a separate place, right? So don't let your kids just, roll over in bed and turn on the iPad and go, no, eat, and don't let them do their homework in the bed before they go to sleep. Eat, bad idea. There really needs, like she said, your bed needs to be for sleep and sick only. Like your kids, they can be in their bed if they're asleep, that they're going to sleep, just because your body will develop it, like she said, this cognitive reality of that you're in the bed more than you should be, and then you have trouble even falling asleep and staying asleep. The battery, that was great. I always describe it as a cell phone. Like, have you ever thought you plugged your cell phone in all night and it didn't quite connect, and you woke up and you're like, oh, that's not going to get me till noon. That's what happens to our bodies when we don't get the restorative sleep we need. And then I also want to talk about if your child is on a routine and they are going to sleep at the same time and they're getting that proper amount of sleep for their age group, but they still seem excessively tired, or we talked about attention, inability to pay attention to what they need to, you might want to have them come see one of our sleep specialists. We have board certified pediatricians who are also board certified in sleep, and we see infants and all the way to geriatrics. So we have a provider for you, for your children. Now is the time to make sure that you're treating your sleep disorder. And if Junior snores and you think it's cute, it's not cute, it's a problem. So snoring in children is a problem that needs to be addressed. Take care of it while they're kids so that they can be healthier adults. Because I see so many people in our clinics that are struggling they're sick. By the time they get to us, they have every comorbid condition in the book because they never got their sleep apnea treated early on, and they probably had it as a child. Enuresis, bedwetting is a big sign of sleep apnea in kids. So if you have, nighttime bedwetters that you can't quite, get past the age of doing that. I mean, I know that happens up to a certain point. You might want to think about getting them looked out for that.
Can I also put in a plug for kids who've had concussions?
Yes, can you? Yeah, will you please? Because that's your specialty.
Well, and we see so many young people with different kinds of brain injuries, but mostly are athletes, children who are victims of domestic violence where there's a lot of battery to the head and the face. Certain sports, obviously, you're more likely, and then other sports, we kind of don't even think about it. Like, there's a lot of concussions in cheer, and I don't think we always think about cheer as being a concussive sport, but there's a lot of falling and tumbling and crushing under pyramids and flyers who don't get caught. But what I want to say is the latest studies out are suggesting that 1 in 3 people with a concussion has the potential for a serious sleep disorder. And we're seeing it in schools. We're seeing excessive daytime sleepiness. We're seeing young people who are having memory, attention, behavior concerns. And when you really start screening for, do you have post-concussive headaches? Have you ever had a loss of consciousness? Have you ever had your bell rung and seen stars? When we really start asking these questions, and then we ask the sleep questions, the numbers shoot through the roof. And so if you have students who are athletes, or they've been in car accidents, they've fallen off their skateboards, you've taken them to the emergency room for concussion concerns, you need to be aware that the potential for many different types of sleep disorders are prevalent in the concussed group. And I think it is highly, highly undiagnosed and underdiagnosed.
Absolutely. Here's a comment. Let's see. My 13-year-old is nocturnal. I swear he goes to bed so late, but he also gets up 2 to 3 times a night. I know I get the electronics turned off early, but honestly, it's so bad. I think routine, again, and discipline, we need to be a little bit more, strict with our kids around routine and schedules. It gets
The
too
cell phone goes in the basket down in the kitchen,
uh,
right?
I think
But there's two other comments I would want to make to this question. One, is there a history of brain injury? Because when we see that circadian rhythm is completely flipped, there's part of it where our sleep patterns move back in adolescence. Mother Nature's cruel that way, right? And it's more time for sex, drugs, and rock and roll in the middle night hours. And that's partly the adolescent brain. And I always tell parents, read Dan Siegel's book, Brainstorm, so that you really understand the adolescent brain and what's going on with sleep and clocks and circadian rhythms and everything. But more importantly, if brain injury is not a concern, we have strategies on how to move that sleep schedule up. And it is a routine, and it's move it up every 15 minutes, every 3 or 4 days. And you can take a third shift worker and put them back on a first shift schedule within a couple months pretty effectively. Yeah. So I agree. Part of it's parenting. I agree. Part of it could be undiagnosed neurological issues. And the other is get a handle on it.
And circadian rhythms are changing in early adolescence. So a 13-year-old child, they are going to want to stay up later and then sleep in a little bit more, which now, I mean, you know, I don't know what they're doing with, there's always been this debate with early school start times. So we honestly should be getting more sleep now because everyone doesn't have to be out the door by a certain time, you know, working from home, or you don't have to catch the bus. And things like that. So really, this is opportunity to make it easier. We have more time on our hands right now to be better at our routines and our schedule. And I also, you know, what do you think about this? I was promoting, like, you know, use a whiteboard and write your whole schedule down, or iPad or whatever you're doing, and post it so that everyone in the family can see it. And then if everybody has a great attitude that day and everyone sticks to the routine, it wouldn't be a horrible idea to reward an extra 15, 20 minutes, you know, depending on the age of your kids, you know, to stay up a little later. Because it is a more, like, I know that bedtime routines can be really difficult. I know it was my worst thing ever can you imagine that? Of course, my kids are 30 now, but I see it with my granddaughters even, you know, they don't want to go to bed. Like, nobody ever wants to go to bed, right? Until you get to be an early adolescent, then you're like, okay, when you want to go to bed, you're going to bed, and then you never want to get out. But, you know, which is another issue. But I wanted to ask you how you felt about rewarding kids with an extra 20-minute, you know, stay up if they did everything they were supposed to for the day. What do you think? Good or a bad idea?
I'm a firm believer that a routine is a routine.
I know.
And I will gladly reward you with other things other than changing the routine.
Yeah.
And part of that is because, but I also spend a lot of my career in the disability community, and one of the survival strategies we teach families and we teach survivors of significant catastrophic injuries is routines will give you quality of life. Because once you're in the routine and the habits there, it actually frees your brain and your mind up to do other things. So I'm all about the reward of the next day. We'll all go to Dairy Queen. You know, that to me is by far more rewarding than 20 minutes up late at night.
Sugar over sleep, yeah.
Right?
Sugar important. Don't sacrifice sleep. Go get some sugar.
Yeah, go do something. The other thing, can I just say, in the concept of COVID-19, and this is not a political statement at all, people need to turn off the TV.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Because what we're doing now is we're adding this next level of stress in an already stressed out situation where we don't have a lot of coping skills because we haven't been down this road before. And the last thing your brain needs to do right now is have external stress already on a level of unpredictability.
Right.
And I'm a firm believer that whatever's going on out there, they're all going to do it no matter what we do anyway. It doesn't matter. So stay focused on where you're at, stay focused on what you're doing, and don't keep going to the world clock and looking at the national debt or going to the world count of how many people got diagnosed today. I mean, nobody had those numbers for the flu last year.
Yeah.
Nobody counts those numbers for brain injuries or heart attacks or people dying from diabetes. We don't sit there and go to some clock and go, oh my gosh, 9 more people died from diabetes today.
Yeah. We
don't do it. So why are we absolutely beating ourselves over the head with these numbers and the media? Families are already stressed enough.
Right.
Let's stay focused on happy. Let's stay focused on we're functional. Let's stay focused on we're strong. We'll get through this together. We've got skills. We can dig a little deeper. We're going to be okay. Gee, this is a chance to pray as a family. Gee, this is a chance to play some board games as a family. Wow, we actually have time to sit and talk to one another. We have incredible opportunities right now to do exactly as you suggested, which is get better at doing what we should be doing, which is good parenting.
I love it. Amen. Amen to that, all of that. You know, you talked about meditation and prayer and having a routine, and, you know, I'm a woman of faith, and I also am certified in Yoga Nidra, which is yoga for sleep, and I'm actually advanced certified in Yoga Nidra for kids. And so I do have an event this month. I can't remember exactly when, but I am going to be teaching Yoga Nidra by the Sea online live like we're doing now. So valleysleepcenter.com/events if you guys want to see what else we're talking about this month. We have some great things. We're talking about crisis fatigue with Dr. Froese, our sleep psychologist. You mentioned a little bit about that. And we were talking about sleep violence, you know, things that happen that are violent when people are sleeping. That's from Dr. Leonard Moss. Oh gosh, the list goes on. And I just want to say thank you so much to Dr. Sue. If anybody wants to talk to her or get a hold of her, do you want to put your slide up one more time in the very beginning?
Sure.
All right.
Absolutely. And I did leave references and resources, and you guys can post this. My contact information is down at the bottom.
Right. So Dr. Sue.
Or Tiffany.
Yeah. And there's Tiffany as well, her assistant. And I want to thank you guys so much for your time tonight. I love this. This was so good. And I will send you the YouTube link so that you can use it as well. And have a beautiful evening, everyone.
And can we attach the PowerPoint so that people have access to it?
Yeah, we can.
Perfect.
Okay, you email me that and I'll get it attached. All right. Bye, everyone. Have a great night.
Have a great school year.
Yes, have a great school year. Exactly. Bye.
Bye.